Good morning, everybody. Welcome to chapel. We're going to start off with some worship today, so you could rise and join us. That'd be great.
Faithfulness promise fulfilled in a moment. We're still watching it unfold. There's good news for the captive, a proclamation for every soul. This liberty is for the broken, an invitation to be made whole. Listen for the free man singing, He's delivered me. Look out for the woman shouting, His garment made me clean. Listen up for the seasons changing, He's rebuilding everything. Listen for the people shouting, this is Jubilee.
The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. I'm anointed to bring hope. Promise fulfilled in the moment. We're still watching it unfold. There's good news for the captive, a proclamation to every soul. This liberty is for the broken, an invitation to be made whole. Listen for the free man singing, He's delivered me. Look out for the woman shouting, His garment made me clean. Listen up for the seasons changing, He's rebuilding everything. Oh, listen for the people shouting, this is Jubilee. This is Jubilee.
There is true joy in His freedom. Open your heart and receive it. There is a hope to believe in. Jesus, Jesus. There is true joy in His freedom. Open your heart and receive it. There is a hope to believe in. Jesus, Jesus.
There is true joy in His freedom, so open your heart and receive it. There is a hope to believe in. Jesus, Jesus. There is true joy in His freedom, so open your heart and receive it. There is a hope to believe in. Jesus, Jesus. Listen for the free man singing, He's delivered me. Look out for the woman shouting, His garment made me clean. Listen up for the seasons changing, He's rebuilding everything. Listen for the people shouting, this is Jubilee. Can you hear it? Can you hear it? Can you hear it? This is the sound of Jubilee. Can you hear it? Can you hear it? Can you hear it? This is the sound of Jubilee. This is the sound of Jubilee. This is the sound of Jubilee. Listen for the free man singing, He's delivered me. Look out for the woman shouting, His garment made me clean. listen up, for the season's changing, 'cause he's rebuilding everything. Oh, listen for the people shouting, this is Jubilee.
Lord, thank you for this morning, just that we get to come and worship you, your great name, and the fact that you're just an unchanging God, and your faithfulness does not depend on ours. We've just failed you so many times, God. I just pray that as Pastor Steph comes up, that you bless her message as we prepare to wrestle with the harder topic, God. And I just pray that you bless everyone here. Just prepare our minds and hearts for this message and this truth, God. In your name I pray, amen.
Yeah, honestly, can we thank these guys for leading us? Incredible, you guys are awesome. Oh man, powerful, powerful. I'm just always amazed because I know you're up here last night and then you turn around and do this in the morning. Incredible. Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm Pastor Steph. If I haven't met you before, been around, it's been so fun. I love being with you. I'm the lead pastor at Mill City Church, and today my church is the chapel sponsor, which is so awesome. Yes, I have, fortunately for me, a staff of people that are mostly cooler than me, and so some of them are here today. I don't know where they are. Where are you? Stephen, Marin, where are you? There they are. Look at them. Look how cool they are. Very cool. Actually, we're all dorky, but that was just trying to encourage you. We specifically want to invite you tomorrow night. We are having a showing of a documentary, Border of Dreams, that maybe some of you have heard of because it's one of your very own Bethel students who's a part of producing this, Soraya, who's also a part of our church. And we're going to be offering free rides to our church tomorrow night to be able to watch that documentary. And so if you're interested in that, these guys will be at the table on the way out, and they've got a way you can sign up to get a ride, or you can just show up. And I think we've got the details. 7 o'clock at our church. We're also going to have some folks from our church plant, Espiritu Santo, which some of you might know, sharing about their immigration journey, as this film is about an immigration journey. And so we would love for you to come hear their stories, because you know what? When we hear the stories of other people, we can love them better. That's what I've always noticed. And so being able to hear the stories of our neighbors, I think, is going to be really powerful. So that's our invitation to you as Mill City, as chapel sponsor today. So thank you, my cool friends, for coming. Yes, thank you, good job. Today, I actually want to start out with kind of a personal story. The summer before my senior year of high school was, to this day, the worst summer of my life. There was two really big things that were going on. The first is that my closest friend at the time, friend from high school, she was going through like debilitating depression. And she was struggling to find resources for that in her life. And the second thing that happened, totally separate, but almost at the same time, was that my dad passed away from an illness that he'd been suffering with for almost 10 years. And so this is the summer before my senior year, and I'm going into supposed to be an awesome year of high school, yet I'm feeling pretty weighted down by these things that are going on. And my mom did something very smart, and she said, hey, I would just be so happy, I'll even go with you. What if you went and talked with a counselor about all the things that are happening in your life right now? And I was a little nervous, but I trusted her, and she went with me. And I'm telling you, I only had a couple conversations with this counselor at that time, but that conversation changed my life in 3 ways. The first way that it changed my life is that it helped me to see that talking about how I feel, while it's not always something I want to do, is super good for me. And I think it helped me overcome the feeling that talking to a counselor would be super, super scary, but it actually wasn't. She was awesome. And so I realized that there was times in my life since then that I've needed to talk to professional counselors many times over the different things, especially as a pastor, that I experienced. But I also realized when I talked to her, changed my life, because I was like, I always have to have people who I can be honest with about how I feel. And that was huge. The second way that conversation with that counselor changed my life is that she taught me about something that I had never heard about before, and it was the concept of codependency. And she explained that when my friend, who was dealing with really debilitating depression, she was leaning on me so much, and she wasn't leaning on anyone else, that what can happen is this form of codependency where she's putting so much of the need for me to support her that I can get in a place where I feel like I have to be the one there for her. And then she said, you can even start to get used to this feeling where it's almost like you need to be needed. man, it blew my mind because I'd never thought about that before, and she was totally right. I had really allowed that relationship. I needed to help her find other people that she could trust. And I have been able to avoid multiple scenarios where I could be in codependent relationships since that conversation. It changed my life, which if you think about it, being a pastor where people are bringing struggles to me all the time, that was key. So she changed my life in that way. And then the third way that that conversation changed my life is that I was listening to this woman talk about the brain and our bodies, and she was a Christian. She was talking about how that connected with our faith and what God was doing to bring healing. And I thought, I want to know the stuff that this lady knows. Like, I want to understand our minds and our bodies and our brains the way that she does. And so what ended up happening was, pretty much because of her, I chose to major in psychology here at Bethel when I became a student. And instead of becoming a counselor like her, which I think I'm a little too wild for, can't sit that long, but I decided to become a pastor, and it gave me the opportunity to be what I would just call, hopefully, a psychologically informed pastor as a spiritual leader. And that has been so huge for me in my ministry. And I'm honestly not even sure if I didn't have the depth of understanding of our minds and our hearts and how that integrates with our spirituality, I don't know if I would have made it the 15 years as a pastor that I have so far, if I'm being totally honest. So that one conversation changed my life. And as you can see, for me, it's super important, this integration of how our brains and our bodies work with how our souls and our spirituality connects. And so that's why I'm just so grateful that we're gonna have this conversation that we're calling Honest to God, okay? Honest to God, how we can have honest conversations with God. And so as we're talking about this, we're gonna be looking at some different Psalms. And so each time for this next few weeks, we're gonna be looking at different Psalms, we're gonna unpack different Psalms. And what you'll notice in the Psalms, put that feeling wheel up there, the emotion wheel, there's every emotion mentioned in the Psalms. Out of the 150 Psalms, you could probably, in my opinion, find all the emotions on the feelings wheel, okay? And everything in between. And sometimes in the same psalm, they're jumping around between, if you look at this wheel, it's got on one side what might be considered uncomfortable emotions, and on the other side what might be considered comfortable emotions. Sometimes a psalmist, who's really a songwriter or a poem writer, will jump back and forth between different colors and different feelings in just one psalm. And what that tells me is that God cares about our emotions. God cares about how we feel. God cares about the things that are going on in our minds and our hearts. And this emotion wheel is important. So the Psalms do this. This is kind of our big idea for this whole conversation. The Psalms help us bring our emotions to God, help us listen to our emotions, and then let God lead us to process and move through our emotions. I'll say it one more time. The Psalms help us to bring our emotions to God, to listen to our emotions, and let God lead us to process and move through our emotions. So just look at the feeling wheel for a second. I wonder if you notice, I don't know if you can read all of them, but I'll read a couple of them to you. Think about the last 48 hours. Do you ever just stop and think about the emotions you've had in the last 48 hours? I wonder how many of the ones that are up there are listed for you. I'm looking at it and I'm like, man, there was a time this weekend where I felt super overwhelmed, really overwhelmed. There was a moment this weekend where I felt super brave because I stepped into something that I knew was gonna be super hard. I look at this and I think oh man, there was some moments that I just felt super loved. When my husband was like, hey, can I just pray for you right now? All of these emotions, but that was just in one weekend. Do you notice some of the things that you felt even over the weekend and the things that you experienced? A good thing would be well, how many of them were on the uncomfortable side and how many were on the comfortable side? Sometimes I think we've almost lost the ability to pay that close attention to how we're feeling. And so, you can literally Google feelings wheel, and look at it and say, how am I feeling? What's going on? Because sometimes we're going through life and we don't even know. So again, I would suggest that the Psalms cover nearly every one of these emotions on both sides of this wheel. And the Psalm we're gonna look at today is the one that's pretty popular. Maybe you have read it or meditated on it. It's Psalm 23. It's the one where David is writing this beautiful Psalm. And I'm gonna read it to you, but I want you to think about this. Whenever you're reading the Psalms, something helpful to think about is two questions. What does this Psalm say about God? And what does this Psalm say about humanity? What does it say about us as humans? It's so cool to look at what is the psalmist saying about humanity and what is the psalmist saying about God? What does it say about us and what does it say about God? So when I read this today, think about, what does this say about God and what does this say about us? And I'm going to read two different translations, okay? So the first one's the NIV. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. And even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. This is the Living Bible translation. Because the Lord is my shepherd, I have everything I need. He lets me rest in the meadow grass and leads me beside quiet streams. He gives me new strength. He helps me do what honors him most. Even when walking through the dark valley of death, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me, guarding, guiding all the way. You provide delicious food for me in the presence of my enemies. You have welcomed me as your guest. Blessings overflow. Your goodness and unfailing kindness shall be with me all the days of my life, and afterwards I will live with you forever in your home. Obviously, Psalm 23 is talking about God as our shepherd. And Jesus points out the connection that he is God in the flesh in John 10:14 when he says, I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep and my sheep know me. He goes on to say, the sheep hear my voice. They recognize my voice. And everywhere Jesus went, when you read stories about Jesus, he's encountering people that have a whole range of emotions, isn't he? And he always meets them where they're at and then invites them to follow if they're willing. And so Jesus is not anxious about people's anxiety. He's not nervous about their nervousness. He's not depressed because of their depression. Like, he's able to handle every emotion that he sees everywhere he went. And he is the good shepherd. Jesus cares about our emotions. He cares about how we feel. He knows how we feel even better than we can understand. We got to use that feelings wheel, and we're still not totally sure. But Jesus understands how we feel. So I want you to imagine this whole time we're having this honest to God conversation, that this chair is here because Jesus is with us. Like, God is right here with us, having this conversation with us. Because God cares so deeply about our emotions. So today we're going to just jump right in and we're going to talk about emotional health, which is just such an important thing for everyone in this room. Mental health, emotional health. God invites us to pursue emotional health. And I want to give a disclaimer because when we're talking about this, we're talking about everybody. But we know that for different people in different seasons of our life, emotional health affects us different. Mental health affects us differently, right? For some of us, it can be a season of our life where it hits us really hard. And we're facing deep things, maybe even mental illness. And sometimes it's less intense, but what I want to say is wherever you're at on that spectrum, God invites all of us to grow. Because we live in a world where we need to constantly be paying attention to growing in our mental and emotional health. I hate to tell you, but this is not a world where we're going to get to take a vacation from that. And so when we think about this, it's personal for everybody, right? Like, you just heard some of my story. Like, it's pretty personal. For everyone in this room, it's personal for me. And I've noticed something in my life, maybe you've noticed this as well when it comes to mental health. There's like this road that we're on, and there's like two ditches on the side of the road. You just imagine if this is something you've experienced. But for me, I've experienced falling into two different ditches. The first ditch I would call the one that's kind of like any negative emotion, any uncomfortable emotion is one that I want to avoid. So the first ditch is, how can I have uncomfortable emotions always be avoided? And I, you know what, frankly, do not always blame myself for wanting to just drive right into this ditch intentionally. So it kind of gets me in this spot where I'm like, if there's anxiety, it means I'm supposed to quit what I'm doing. Like, if you have anxiety for something you're doing, maybe you're not supposed to do it, right? And maybe it causes you to feel stuff like you're angry, but maybe you can just try harder to not be angry because, you know, we don't want to feel those negative things. Or this ditch might look like avoiding having hard conversations, which I know I have fallen in this ditch before, where I know if I avoid having this hard conversation, it's just going to be more uncomfortable later, but I don't want to be uncomfortable now. I remember when I was the RD of Bodine for a few years, I remember this time of year, everybody was all up in their feelings about housing. Does that still happen? We figured it out now. It's easy now. I just feel like we all of us, when I was a student too, it's like we forgot how to have honest conversations with people, or like we forgot how to talk about what we need or be honest about our plans. It's a mess, right? Like we just get into this because we just want to avoid uncomfortable emotions. Man, I have been in this ditch so many times. But I've also fallen in the other ditch, if I'm being honest, and that is the one that I call it's not that bad, right? Like it's not that bad, is it? Ditch. This is the ditch that we can fall into when maybe anxiety or depression or addiction or other things have actually gotten to the point where they're starting to be kind of debilitating. Like it's not anxiety about a test anymore or about a tough conversation. Like it's feeling like kind of crippling, like it's really holding you back and you're functioning. But you're trying to convince yourself like it's not that bad. I mean, I did get out of bed like 2 out of the 5 days this week. You know what I mean? Like just trying to justify like what's going on, or I'm not addicted, like I could stop anytime. I promise, I really think I could. I haven't tried, but I think I could. Do you see what I mean? Like falling into that ditch? Or maybe we try to avoid being honest with ourselves about how like disordered eating has really gotten deep for us. There's just a whole bunch of things, and I'm telling you, like we fall in that ditch so easily. When I think about it in my life, I had 2 different experiences where I fell into this ditch. One was with depression and one was with anxiety. And I wanted so badly for it to not be that bad that I had to focus on it and get help. But I did. Like I needed professional counselors. I needed people and friends in my life, pastors to be praying over me. And at one instance, I did need for a little while to take some medication for depression, because what it did is it helped me have enough resources to keep talking to my counselor, to start to move my body more and eat better and stuff that I knew was going to help my mental health. But it helped me, and I felt like so like bad that I needed to do that. I felt like I shouldn't have to, but it actually just set me free to do the healing that God was inviting me to do in my life. So for me, like I fell in both of these ditches, and you know what? I still do. And so I wonder for you, as you think about this, like where have you fallen in these ditches before? Maybe you're in one of them right now. But I just want to encourage you, like I don't think any of us could avoid them totally. Like they're going to happen in our lives. And so what does that mean for us? Whether we're in the ditch where it's not that bad, we're trying to avoid something really deep, or whether we're just trying to avoid those emotions, what we all have to realize is we need to have people in our lives that we can talk about how we really feel. And so right now, if you're like, I don't know who those people are, can I just invite you, like right this moment, to start praying about that? Like who are the people that you can talk to, honestly? We can talk to God, bring our emotions. Jesus isn't anxious about our anxiety, but God gave us each other too. So let's think about that. So as you think about these ditches, I want to unpack this psalm today. I want you to keep this in mind. Like, what does this look like for you or for people in your life? Where do you find yourself right now when it comes to these? And maybe you're like, listen, Pastor Steph, I'm in a whole nother ditch you don't even have on the screen right now. Okay, that's fine. So let me just talk about this psalm together, okay? The first part, the Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. Let me tell you, I love being by water, like lakes, rivers, streams. I just love it. The ocean, of course, if we ever get to that place. And it does bring peace for me. But I think that this is a little bit more about making sure that you have a nice walk around the lake. Like, I think the invitation is a little bit deeper here. I think it's about getting still enough that you can actually discover what you're feeling. Like actually slowing down enough, and it's a hard thing to do, to actually listen to our emotions, because sometimes we don't know what we're truly feeling because we haven't paused long enough to ask ourselves what we're feeling. And the thing is when you listen to your feelings, guess what? Some of your feelings are not facts, but they're all important. So for instance, like if you had a feeling, you're like realizing my feeling is that I don't feel worthy of God's love. Well, that's not a fact, but it's an important emotion that you've noticed that you're feeling. And so then I invite you to be curious about that. I wonder where that's coming from. What's going on that I'm having this feeling? So here's the point, the first point I want you to think about. Get still and ask, what am I feeling and what is helpful about me noticing this emotion in my life? If you can't imagine the time you're going to be able to pause and ask this question this week, this is the place to start. How can we actually get still enough, maybe by some water, it's frozen right now, but get still and ask, what am I feeling and what is helpful about what I'm noticing about this emotion in my life? I think that's what the psalmist David here is inviting us to do, to let God lead us to stillness so that we know what the heck is going on inside of us. Then he continues in verse 3, he refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. I love the Living Bible version. He gives me new strength. He helps me do what honors him most. I love this. God promises to refresh us and to strengthen us and to guide us to do what God honors God most. We don't have to just figure that out. God guides us to what's going to honor God. But then verse 4 continues, even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Unfortunately, I tried to look at this in the Hebrew. It's not if I happen to walk through the darkest valley, but even though I walk through the darkest valley. We can't actually avoid walking through things that feel like dark valleys in our life. It's part of our lives. But God is with us no matter what. So maybe you're in the dark valley right now. God is with you. Sometimes with the darkness of the valley, like you can't see that God's there, but reach out until you feel like something that feels like God, and hang on and keep moving towards it. But we notice in this passage, what does the good shepherd have? The good shepherd has these two things, a rod and a staff. What do these things do in this image of a shepherd? What do shepherds use that for? Maybe you've seen something like this. It's traditionally thought that the rod was for protecting the sheep, like from predators, and the staff was to be able to guide the sheep and to wrap that hook part around the sheep's chest to be able to move them when they needed to move. The rod protected them, and the staff guided them. And together, these two things comforted them. Do you see how if it was just the rod or just the staff, that wouldn't be very comforting to very vulnerable sheep? They need both to be protected and to be guided. I mean, obviously, the sheep, they need to be protected from predators, but when it comes to being guided, turns out sheep don't like to move. They like to stand still where they are and move slowly around the same green pasture that they love. They want to eat the same grass. Turns out sheep don't like change. They like to just stay right where they are. And here's something really interesting. If the sheep don't move and they just keep eating the grass in the same area, this is still true today. They would keep eating the grass down to the roots. There's actually toxins in the roots that would make the sheep sick. And so it's so important that the shepherd, if it's a good shepherd, is going to lead them to the next pasture that they need to be in, even though they don't want to go, and sometimes have to be dragged a little bit with that hook because they need to get where there's grass that's good for them and healthy for them because they're making themselves sick and they don't even know it. This is the kind of shepherd that God is in our life. Aren't we so much like sheep? I'm just like, we're so much like sheep. I wish it was like a little bit of a cooler animal. Sorry if you like sheep a lot, but like, we are so much like sheep. We don't want to move when it's uncomfortable. We struggle with change. It's hard. We want to just keep eating the grass that we know because we're not totally sure there's going to be grass in that spot that the good shepherd is leading us into. But just like the sheep, we've convinced ourselves that we can just stay, but we've got to move. It's not good for us. I think it's like when we've convinced ourselves that self-comfort and self-care are the same thing. Turns out they're not. Definitely self-indulgence is not the same thing as self-care, in case anyone was curious. The hard thing about self-care, which we are all for, right? Like we're for self-care, is that sometimes, even oftentimes, self-care is not comfortable. That's hard. It's not comfortable to push through anxiety, to take that test. When it's not debilitating anxiety, like it's okay that we feel that way for a while. Guess what? It might even motivate us to study when we don't want to. It's not comfortable to be the first one to say that you're heading to bed when everybody's having fun, because you know if you don't get sleep, you're going to be a mess. That's not comfortable to be the one that says, I got to go to sleep, or you guys need to be quiet. Seriously, I need to sleep. It's not comfortable to share our emotions with others. I still don't think it is in all the years that I've done it. It's hard to be honest about anger or loneliness or fear. But we can't heal what we won't name. Who are the people that you can name how you feel? It doesn't have to be super debilitating to need to talk to somebody when you're feeling hurt or in pain. Who are those people? Again, pray about who those people are. It's not comfortable when we realize that we might be dealing with a more debilitating form of anxiety or depression or a struggle that's now a place where we need to actually look at those mental health matters posters. You can't miss those. Sometimes it is not comfortable to make that phone call and to say that I need help. But if you find yourself in that maybe it's not that bad, can I just ask you to get a second opinion from somebody who loves you? That's all. Like, just get a second opinion. Maybe it's not that bad, but like, why not call health services, call Christian formation, call counseling services, get a second opinion from somebody who knows some stuff about just how bad it is, because maybe you don't want to wait until it's just that bad. So, not comfortable. It's not comfortable to be led by the Good Shepherd. But here's a question: how might God be trying to protect you and guide you in growing healthier in your mental health? I don't know what that is for each of us, but I believe that God has an invitation for everyone daily to move towards God in emotional health. In our world today, like, I think there's just no other way. Like, there's too much going on all the time coming at us for us to say that can be an afterthought. Like, we got to think about it. There's a lot that we're up against in that way. So you might not have all the steps in your view of like exactly where you are now and where you want to get, but the Good Shepherd knows. The Good Shepherd leads the sheep one day at a time. The sheep hear his voice. It could help for all of us to just think about the things that you care about in life when it comes to your emotional health. Like, what might you be held back from? What are things you're hoping for in your life that if you take the steps today that might be uncomfortable, you're going to be able to live in healthy relationships, because we want those, right? And like feel like we have enough emotional strength to do justice and love mercy, to be people who feel like we can be healthy in how we do our careers, right? Because we know we had what it took, but the resources exist for us to grow and to give us the best chance not to be held back by our emotional health. Those resources exist spiritually, psychologically, in people resources, medication, all of those things. You don't have to know how you're going to get from here to where you want to be, but if we trust the Good Shepherd one day at a time, we can get there. I'm going to have Nate come up and just play some music. I have a couple things I want to encourage you to reflect on, but the first thing I want to do is just read the end of this Psalm 23. You provide delicious food for me in the presence of my enemies. You've welcomed me as your guest. Blessings overflow. Your goodness and unfailing kindness shall be with me all the days of my life. And afterwards, I will live with you forever in your home. Even though we have to move through really hard things in life, like dark valleys, God is good and God is kind. The evil and the brokenness in this world will mean that it's going to be a lifelong effort for us to continue to grow in our emotional health. It's never over. It's not like you reach a certain point in your life. It is a battle that is worth fighting. And if you're feeling hopeless, can I just tell you, do not give up. Do not give up. I know that hopelessness comes, but God is fighting for you. There's people in your life that are fighting for you. You're worth it. Your life is precious. We need you. When we look at this passage, it might be easy to miss something important, and that is that there's a future hope that David's talking about. When we're with a loving and kind God forever, and there'll be no more crying and mourning and pain and mental illness and suffering, because Jesus will return and make all things new. But until then, we're going to have hope that he's going to lead us through. So let me put these reflection questions up here, and I just want you to take a minute just to reflect on these right now before we head out. What am I feeling? What is helpful about noticing the emotions in my life? How might God be trying to protect me and guide me to growing healthier mentally and emotionally? Just take 1 minute, and then we're going to close by reading the psalm together. I don't know what it is that God's speaking to you, but I bet it starts with being honest with God and figuring out what people you can be honest with. That's probably the next step for all of us. God loves you so much. You are so loved. You're worth it. You're worth pursuing this, no matter where you're at. So I just invite you to close with me by just reading this psalm together before we head out. Will you join me in reading Psalm 23? Can we put it up on the screen? The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. Go in peace. If you'd like some prayer, come on up front. We'd love to pray with you. Have a good day.